you mentioned earlier that the Senior Bowl was where you it did hit you, where you had a chance to reflect on it. You had a minute to just think about it. Oh, wait, we did all this.
Yeah.
I'm curious because this group that just did all this, before we get on to the spring practice, these are the guys that you either inherited or they believed in you when you were 4 and 8.
Yep.
How much more special does it make what you did because it's that group?
I think it really does. I think that just in how we've kind of preached things and what we've tried to do about development and the route at which we wanted to kind of build the program and for it to kind of work like that, like your first group. I mean, I'd say for most of those part, with the exception of Dez and a couple guys, it was our first kind of recruiting class. Dez was committed before we got here. And thank goodness there was no portal, because we probably would have went and looked for somebody else. But, he's still, we would consider him still our first recruiting class.
Right.
And there was maybe a couple kids that we had inherited that were still on the team. But just to be able to even see those guys over a 5-year period and what they've grown to and what we've grown to, I think we've grown as to be better coaches. I know I've grown to be a much better coach. And I think that, like I always said, it was hard for me in the first couple of years, because when you don't know the kids, it's a little bit harder to motivate them and push them. Getting to know them better, and not just recruiting, but also just spending more time with them. I think we've done a really good job at helping them continue to grow so that they could be their best version of themselves, and it's shown.
Well, and you guys run a developmental program where you're going to take a guy in, you want him to be the best version of himself in 3-4 years. Does that have to change in the era of the transfer portal, or can you be the kind of coach who runs a program where guys are like, no, I'm good, I want to stay?
I think so. And we're going to keep trying. Even before the transfer portal, we used kind of the grad transfers just in a select way. And so we've kind of continued with the transfer portal. We only technically will use that in a select way that even we did in year 1, 2, and 3 with grad transfers. And we want to be, that developmental group. We want to bring in, 20 to 23 high school kids a year and do our best work with those guys. And, I hope we don't change. I know that our philosophy is not to change. But I think that, we got to continue to adapt and grow with our program as well.
Well, you mentioned using the transfer portal strategically. You and Dabo Sweeney, I think, are the only two that have taken a guy back out who left you and then came back. Yeah. In your case, it's Ben Bryant, who is, he battled Dez for the starting job. He didn't get it. He goes to Eastern Michigan and spends a year as their starter. And now he's back to compete with Evan Prater at your practice. What is that like, that, when the guy comes back to your program and he's gotten to be a starter, and does he come back carrying himself differently? Does it look different?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, we kind of considered Ben a starter here, and it's kind of crazy, going into Dez's year 3, we went into camp and said, this is going to be a competition. And we weren't kidding. We just felt like Ben deserved that right. And, I don't know that we were believers in Dez, but he was a good player. The sophomore found ways to win, but he was still growing. And it was the best thing that happened to all of us, because we recognize that Dez is even better when he's thrown in a competition. And I think it made Ben better. And so we've always kind of considered Ben as ours. He's one of us. And, even when he left and was at Eastern, our guys, if they'd be playing on a Friday night or they'd be playing on a Tuesday night, we'd be coming in for practice and they'd be like, hey, put that thing on, put on Eastern, because, Ben was one of ours. And so those guys always had great respect for him, always watched him, always stayed with him. So as he comes back, I don't think, he's missed a beat. I think that he understands what our philosophy of healthy competition looks like. He's seen it. And, I think he kind of warrants it and wants that.
Well, and that competition, how does that work in your world when you're trying to pick a new starting quarterback, a leader of your offense, a guy the whole team's got to rally around? What criteria are you looking for, and how do you make that decision?
Well, it'll be over a long period of time, and we want to give the guys obviously equal and opportunities. And there's nobody that's going to name anything early. That they're both really good players. They both have got to have some different opportunities, and so there's not any one thing like, well, these are the 5 parameters that we're going to do. This is the timeline of that in which we're going to do it. we're going to let it kind of play out. And where it was very fortunate for us and really kind of helped develop and create the culture 4 years ago when it was a quarterback battle, even before when it was a quarterback battle with Desmond Ridder and Hayden Moore. Hayden was a 2-year starter. And we had kind of talked about it. I said, how you guys handle this healthy competition will be an incredible example to our entire team in our locker room. And those guys did a phenomenal job. They competed. They actually went into game one going to play both of them. And we said, we'll play. This is the route we're going to go, and we'll play it from there. And kind of it's history now that once Dez went in there in the third series against UCLA, he never came back out until he got hurt at the end of the year in the bowl game. And to Hayden Moore's credit, they had a great relationship and competition, and he stepped in and won a bowl game for us. So that example holds in a lot of our minds, and we expect the same thing from these guys, and it'll be a great example to our program.
How much does it help to have two guys that are familiar with the culture of your program in that competition? This isn't a case where you brought somebody in who was somewhere else, or you're throwing a true freshman into it. These are guys who, you sold on this dream. They've seen it happen, and now they have a chance to take it.
Well, for us, we believe it's really important at that position in particular to not want to go that route of bringing somebody in just because they don't understand. They don't know what the culture's been like. They haven't been built up and brought up in that locker room. I'm not saying you can't and won't, and wouldn't create some competition someday if you have to do that. But I just think that what it shows for the guys in the program that they believe in the guys that they have and guys that work at it. And so I think it's not just a quarterback competition and bringing those guys back and having that. I think it kind of sets the parameters for a lot of things for our entire program, and even in the recruiting side of things.
So when you played Georgia in the Peach Bowl, you didn't watch that game back again for a long time. You watched the Cotton Bowl against Alabama right away and multiple times. What did you see in that? What did you get out of that experience, seeing your team play against Alabama? And I mean, I'm curious, right before the half, how much were you kind of like, just rewatching that second quarter? Because for those who didn't watch that game, you guys you're right there.
Yeah, well, actually, it's the first two series that I as much as anything that I put on myself. I just don't know that I talked enough and had them ready for the environment, and I just don't think the offense went down and did a good job in the first set. But I just think even mostly defensively, we just weren't ourselves. We weren't real sharp. And I think as we settled in after that second series, call it what it is, whether, there was a little bit of shell shock, whether there was a little bit of, whatever. I mean, our guys aren't ones that have any doubt. They really we're a confident crew. But just in general, the first two series defensively, we did not play, kind of the way that we have played. And I just, not just making plays, just, not as clean. And so I look back at those two more so to say, shoot, that's on me. Then you get into that third quarter where you finally create some of those opportunities and you just couldn't take advantage of them. And so, yes, I watched it mainly because I was more worried about, this one and the Alabama one that in my head, there was something did we get out physical? Did we get, manhandled in some ways that I was more worried about?
Well, I'm curious, is it when you rewatch it and you have a more clinical eye on it, does it kind of reinforce your recruiting philosophies, your personnel, your roster? Because you didn't get blown off the field. That was a case where you had a bunch of guys that could compete. You said the first two series, if one of those goes differently, we're talking about a pretty different game. I'm curious, do you look at that game and you played Georgia the year before and Georgia goes on to win the national championship this year? Does it inform how you try to build your roster going forward?
I think that's what gives us the chance to say, okay, we're always looking for things to reassure us to what we're doing, right? I mean, we see better than we hear. We're the same way. So to see how some of those guys develop, to see what, you need to play with the very best, gives us that confidence, not just our kids, but also confidence in how we're moving the program forward. And to know that you can do it this route, you can take those 2 and 3 star guys and work and work and work. And I'm not saying you don't. Now maybe we got an opportunity to go with more 3 and some 4. I mean, but the right ones, the ones that are going to fit within your culture of what you want to do, your environment, that are going to grow, and they're going to be completely different 2-3 years after you get them. That philosophy for us, at least it gave us that opportunity to say, okay, we can stick with this. We got to grow and we got to adapt. But I do believe for us, we're on the right track for what we want to do to take the next step.
Well, and that's the thing. You guys have been in on those guys. You've never shied away from recruiting any of those types of players. Do you feel like you're in the mix longer, having more of them say, you know what, I am going to take a visit now?
We have been. We've done a good job. I think that's where we're going to now in the last year and then moving forward. We're going to have more opportunities. Now we got to stick to our guns about who we are and what we really are looking for. But then we've got to find ways to, kind of seal the deal on some of those. And I mean that more so within the kids within our 300-mile radius. I think that's where, 81% of our team is from. And if we can really take the next step in that area, I think we have a chance to, make our program even different than it has been. And, that'll open up some of those other 20% in the recruiting. But when you go outside of that, for us, we're making sure we're finding the right ones.
I know a lot of your day-to-day is focused on getting this team ready for 2022, but when you are recruiting, when you are talking to prospective players, they're probably going to be playing in a different league for most of their careers. How much do you talk about that? Do you think about what that will look like and what Cincinnati will look like as a Big 12 program?
We do. I mean, you always got to be thinking 2 years ahead, especially in recruiting. And so that's where you don't want to, change your philosophies. But I think it gives you an opportunity because let's be honest, the one kind of term that has kind of been the sticking point in a lot of the recruiting is that P and that 5, which we don't say within our program, that whole stigma, for the last few years has been one of those ones that, we don't talk about, we won't use as an excuse, but has been, what's kind of, in some ways haunted you. And I'm not saying that's why you didn't get guys, but it was a great excuse for some to make the decisions that they make. So for us to use, where we're headed and what the Big 12 brings to us, I think just gives us another, kind of stepping stone to, making sure that, there's not as an excuse on both sides, for the players, for the kids, for the families, and for us to not say, hey, we got to win these battles and we got to land these kids.